Welcome to the latest episode of the Breakneck podcast with myself, Ian Sweeney, and I've got Dr. Matt Bashensky on with us as well. Welcome, Matt.
Very nice to be here with you, Ian. How have you been?
I've been very well. We've got a really interesting topic this week. Latest essay from the CEO of Anthropic. The essay is The Adolescence of Technology. Super interesting essay. And I think if you've listened to any of our other episodes, AI 2027, for example, you know, I think it'll have echoes. We'll see where the episode goes. But before we jump into it, Matt, I don't know about you. It's been just crazy the amount of stuff that has happened in the last couple of days. Here's what I wrote down, and you just added another one I wasn't aware of. The SaaS apocalypse, Claude Opus 4.6, Moltbot, OpenClaw, that whole thing. Not that long ago, Claude Cowork. You just told me, and I wasn't even aware that OpenAI launched a new version of their LLM today. I just haven't had a chance to get anywhere close to that. It just feels to me that January 2026/February has been ridiculous.
Breakneck?
There you go. I mean, in the truest sense of the word.
Like we don't even have time to ourselves to chat with each other. By the time we get to the podcast, we've been chatting all week. And by the time we get to the podcast, there's so much more that's happened, and it's almost like, well, we'd have to have a whole other episode. Yeah, so let's go through the things that have happened this week, because, like, you know, there's sometimes I like to produce evergreen content. This is not one of those medium. Right? It's just like this is stuff that's happening right now. If you watch this in 2 weeks, it might not be that interesting. Bitcoin's collapsing today. Bitcoin's down 15%. Amazon's down 10%. Amazon, Google, like all these hyperscalers that do report public numbers, it's something like $600 billion this year they'll be spending on CapEx, which is going to be primarily data center provisioning, right? So that's going to flow through to all of the chip manufacturers. We were kind of like wondering, is NVIDIA at a bubble? It's like, well, $600 billion is going to go somewhere. What a crazy week.
It is so crazy. So maybe it's even more important to take a pause, and we had to take a pause because this is a long essay, to read this essay from Dario Amadei. And by the way, this is the second kind of big, this is a counter to another essay he wrote before. So the first one was very, very nicely titled Machines of Loving Grace, which was an optimistic view from the CEO of, you know, one of the top two frontier model providers. This new one, The Adolescence of Technology, is a more conservative, pessimistic view of AI. Cautionary tale.
The way I read this, and it's not like a essay with like a big thesis. I think there's a framing, which is we're going through adolescence, which we have adult capabilities, but still childlike control issues. And I have a 4-year-old. And she, you know, it's like you go through these periods of your life where you have a lot more strength and capability, but you haven't necessarily integrated completely the type of control that you would have after, you know, dealing with those emotions or those capabilities for a long time. So it's, you know, a kid who can drive a car, but also hasn't really thought through, maybe I shouldn't speed. And I think back to when I was like 17 driving a car, and it's like, I survived, but, you know, there's some moments that were very scary. And I think that's how they're framing this essay and talking about adolescence. But mostly it's about articulating the specific modes of failure for AI. But what's interesting, I think it's a counterpoint to a different pessimistic episode we did, which was AI 2027, which is it's going to be doomed, because what AI 2027 says, as soon as these capabilities get to a certain level, there's going to be this singular choice that either it goes well or it goes badly. Either the AI hates us and gets the robots and then kills us all immediately. And literally the essay, you could toggle it. It was a very cool little webpage they had. You could toggle it, which is like good path, none of us ever die again, you know, infinite, we go to the stars. Bad path, we're all just ruthlessly murdered in our sleep by AI, and they don't even make a big deal about it. That was just the end of things. And so this is a much longer essay, surprisingly, despite it. And it really does break down like 5 different major categories, and then the specific failure modes and how that might occur. But my point is, it's instead of it being like a singular failure, like literally the singularity,
Yeah.
It was, these are going to be a set of problems that are going to become more definite in the future, and maybe we're going to even have more problems. But we're entering a world where we're going to have to manage lots of difficult questions about democracy, defense, biohazards, and things like that. And here are some of the strategies. And by the way, in order to confront these things, we're going to have to adopt AI. It's not just something that's going to run away from us. It's going to be, we're going to have to take advantage of the tools that now have this capability to build ourselves into a system which also has that adult level control and not the child level control that you have during adolescence. Does that do a good
Yeah.
job of kind of capturing
Yeah,
that?
it does, and it's let me embellish that a little bit. I found it a really very well written essay, much more holistic and multidimensional in its approach. One of the opening lines is, "Humanity is about to be handed almost unimaginable power, and it is deeply unclear whether our social, political, and technological systems possess the maturity to wield it." Right? If you're the CEO, does your PR department allow you say these types of things? No, absolutely not. So I think it's really, really mature in terms of of his perspective. And I think it looks good for them. But let's lay out his.
Well, and I think there's something very authentic about the fact that Dario writes these types of essay, which is, originally all of the original team at Anthropic were part of OpenAI, and they split off due to, whatever reason, but their major way that they're differentiating themselves is that they were a much more focused on AI safety, and they felt that OpenAI, which had originally been, this AI safety organization, had kind of also along the way of investigating how to be safe with AI, had actually invented AI. So, and then it was kind of taking it, and now it's kind of taking it over. And you see that reflected in how Dario talks about something called, there's a concept, and it's a little bit subtle, but it's hyperstition. And they talk about, if you treat models and talk about models as if they're bad, that actually, because they're reading this, is self-reinforcing. And this hyperstition, it's like, oh, well, AI hates us. Well, AI reads all this stuff about how AI hates us. And then they're like, yeah, this is right. I watched The Matrix. We should kill you. This is good. It's like, don't talk about it. Like, if you're training this thing, train it to want these much more interesting, stable configurations of the world where human beings still exist, than training it to be like, well, I have one job, and it is to turn you all into paper clips.
Yeah, he doesn't try to anthropomorphize AI, but in the parallels are amazing. And the other thing that I've made this much more compelling than the AI 2027 one is, it's fairly apparent that he has much more hands-on experience of how to influence these things, the things they do and the things they don't do, the things they do we want them to do. It's very humanistic in terms of the way it operates. But let's lay out a little bit of his framework and delve in a little bit deeper. So his point is, at some point in time, AI will reach what he called powerful autonomy. I think he's dodging AGI. And he kind of describes it with 5 dimensions, which are fairly simple. It's in terms of pure intelligence, it's smarter than Nobel Prize winners across many different fields. It has all the interfaces available that a human being working virtually would have: text, audio, video, music, keyboard, aka multimodal, as we've been talking about it for a long time. It doesn't just passively answer questions. It can be given tasks that take hours. If you've been watching whatever it's called, Moltbot, OpenClaw, whatever, it just happened over the weekend. It essentially encapsulates exactly this bullet point. 4th one is it doesn't have a physical embodiment, but it has access to all the tools and potentially robots and laboratory equipment. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're on the bubble. What else is interesting here? The resources used to train the model can be repurposed to run millions of instances of it. Don't know that we're exactly there, but I guess we're speaking to compute. And then each of these million copies can act independently and copy themselves. So there are 6 points there. 3 we've already hit in the last 12 months since he wrote his essay in 23, actually. So it's maybe 24 months. So we're well on the way to what he would describe powerful autonomy. And he says when we get to powerful autonomy, there are 5 types of risks. Autonomy risks. So what will a thing do if it's autonomous? Misuse for destruction, so humans taking advantage of it and using it for bad. Misuse for seizing power, so think about influencing humans to assume power. Economic destruction, so that's people essentially losing their jobs, and then the fifth one is sort of unforeseen circumstances. If this thing happens super quickly, what are the unforeseen circumstances that we don't currently understand? So that's kind of the framework. Matt, what have we got on the screen?
Okay, it has broken it down as one of these pentagram diagrams where, autonomy, destruction. And so this is a rearticulation of a safety framework. And I say articulation because now instead of is it safe or aligned or unaligned, the impact for Anthropic, they're now evaluating it across several parameters. So instead of one parameter, they now have 5 parameters, right? And this is like kind of, really what you would want to see is that we want to be more specific. And they talked about instead, and then really the idea of articulation is central to the case he's making, is that you don't want to make the discussion, if the discourse around AI is that it's unsafe and therefore we need to stop it. Well, if you only have one parameter, like in 2027, it's either going to kill us or not. It's either aligned or unaligned. And then you're going to invite solutions that are also single parameter. We're going to stop AI or we're going to let it happen, right? You're going to be those kind of all or nothing. Whereas if you start to develop a discourse where we're all making distinctions between, potentially things like tyranny and potentially things like biohazards. Well, biohazards you address with, potential different types of technology, and they have, he talks about that. But tyranny is all about making more robust voting things, right? It's not so much overlap between the solutions to tyranny and the solutions to biohazard. And as a result, we're going to have more focused responses to them, which I think is a big part of the motivation here, is that there's so many people who call for shutting down data centers, right? And then there's the counter, which is Elon's like, well, I'll put all the data centers in space. You can't stop me. It's like, and really that's not moving us forward because China's building the AI data centers, right? If they can, they're behind on the chips, but eventually they'll catch up. So it's like if those of us, and I don't think China as a governmental model is what we want replicated. We want, it's hard to say the US, but we want an open society, pluralistic institutions which are resilient but also responsive to people's demands, very like centered in human needs. If we want that to survive, we need AI to have move forward, but in a way that specifically addresses in detail these concerns, and not one that just says, well, we're not going to do AI, which is what Europe has essentially done. They're like, we're not going to do data, we're not going to do computers, or we're not going to do AI, we're going to make some more regulations while China continues to move forward. And I don't think, President Xi is actually concerned, like, can I live forever? Or are people going to bioattack me? What if President Xi does live forever? I mean, like, that's...
So there's a multitude of possible negative / catastrophic outcomes listed in here. Rolling it up into a ball, you spent some time with the essay. What was your sense? Are we, for the want of a better description, fucked? Is it something in between? Or is this much ado about nothing?
Like, my own feeling on this is I love the proliferation of problems to work on that this essay presents. And it really makes me more confident. Honestly, I hate...
Why so? Why so? Generally, I enjoy that. I enjoy problems and
Yeah,
problem
well, look,
solving.
my core concern is not that, like, I don't think one of my concerns about AI is my living conditions will be impacted. And I'm not particularly concerned with AI killing me. What I'm concerned with is a future where human beings have nothing to do, right? And we might as well be dead at that point. I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, like, but then the counterpoint is, oh, human beings will always have something to do. Okay, but if I can't imagine that, if it's simply putting my kids to bed each night, but I can't prepare them for a future where they matter, like, that's very concerning to me. Like, if I didn't matter, okay, I'll retire at some point. You kind of say, oh, I'm going to go, drink, eat fajitas or whatever. I've seen people, they just get old. They love their little margaritas and fajitas. Like, I can imagine myself doing that, but what am I going to do with my children if they don't really have a role to play in society? And it's kind of, and you see this is a real problem. You see, some of the people who are children of billionaires, they should have every preparation possible, turn out to just be total bums. And, like, the aristocracy of like the 18th and 19th century just kind of like self-immolated in the course of 20, 30 years to the point where you don't even, I mean, people almost don't talk about the fact that they're aristocrats because it's kind of shameful because of like, just if you have things taken care of you for you, it's very hard to appear like a person that I would have respect for. Um, and what if all of that happens simultaneously for everybody? That is a type of doom. And in this essay, I can imagine working on, oh, well, we got to put all of our effort towards biodefense. Yeah, eating food and shelter is taken care of, but there is this whole world that only really affects humans, which is protecting ourselves from other humans and biodefense. It's like, that's a kind of a silly future now, but it is a future where like there's going to be innovation and risk and coordination and people working together, um, building democratic systems that are resilient to AI. That's a problem I would think me and my children would be able to work on for quite a while. And so that's actually like positive. Like we're going to get
Energizing.
into
Yeah. I
trouble,
mean,
but what kind of trouble?
I don't know if if this is what you meant, but you and I are from the problem solving class, right? Sometimes we're called entrepreneurs, but we're not the only ones that do that. But do you put a bunch of interesting problems in front of me? My problem is limiting myself to the problems I solve, right? You can call them projects, business, whatever you want, right? I'm intrigued and excited about that. The repercussions of having too many things to work on is you don't deliver on any of them, right? None of them get delivered to a high enough quality. And we're right now in this state. Well, we're always in a state of flux, right? Things are always changing for humanity. But it's the scale of that flux right now that is the issue, right? And can we actually, well, I mean, we can't. We listed out the start of this, the things that have changed in the last week. And at this time last year, we would have come to this episode and we would have absorbed all of that. We'd have talked about it, we'd reflected on it, whatever. Things are just moving so quickly now that I'm not sure that we'll have the opportunity to work on a bunch of those problems that would, potentially save us. Now, maybe I'm just in a very pessimistic mood today, but it's a real challenge here to be able to
Yeah,
address these things quickly enough.
yeah, you go back and read stories about, I think, far less integrated and resilient version of our society from like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and dealing with the Industrial Revolution, with mechanization, I think was a similarly big shift. You went from a situation where 90% of people essentially lived on farms and honestly lived in a very similar type of subsistence farming that they had for thousand thousand plus years, into the past, right? Like since the Roman Empire, essentially that's what Europe was, and they came to the United States and they were doing the same thing. But they were doing a little faster, a little better, and then suddenly what happened was the quality of those industrial implements, and in particular their ability to use far more power than they had ever. Right? It was like better. Like you go look at Europe and the history of Europe, like the introduction of a better plow, and you can watch it just radically improve the rate at which children survive, right? Like, so like technology has always affected our life, but in that particular inflection where we went from primarily 90% of Americans working in agriculture to now it's 3%. You think of all of the new things that people had to adopt in order to find usefulness. And it was really only until World War II that we were forced into this becoming mechanized people. We were forced to be enframed into a mechanistic worldview where we were workers, we worked for the factory was what mattered, and we worked for it. It went from a craftsman and agricultural to industrial processes where the industrial process controlled what was going to happen, and human beings just had to find a way to fit in, and we became workers, and we had like a disaffection, and we felt alienated, right? I mean, you talk about Marx. That was the case even in the 1850s. But in the United States, like women had to work. Like people that were at the margin of society were suddenly sucked into this system. And in a lot of ways, I think it was great for certain subgroups like African Americans to be pulled out of agriculture into a system where it was forced to have a much higher consideration of their rights. I'm bringing all this up not to perform a coherent picture, but that was a big transition. And then I think between 1960 and 5 years ago, we had this pretty stable understanding of ourselves as business, white collar versus blue collar. We had to make the calls and do the meetings, and we had similarly this advancing frontier of mechanization that helped us. And now I think that mechanization of the problem solver, scientist, engineering class, the white collar worker has now reached a crescendo as well, where I don't think we're going to look back and see ourselves in the same way that we have for the last 60, 70 years. So,
Yeah, I mean, the framework that Amadei lays out is this notion of the first essay, Machines of Loving Grace, was it all the things that we will be able to do, right? This time of abundance, a beautiful society, as he called it. But we have this adolescence, this transition, which, to your point, we've done before, right? Shifting towards the industrial age, and then even to the digital age. And I wasn't around in those times, and I haven't looked at the information that's available. But I'd love to know how long that shift took to the industrial age, because that's really what it is. It's all down to time,
yep.
and
Well, there's
it's
parts of the world that still have not been touched by industrialism. We call that extreme poverty. Extreme poverty has declined, from 80, 90% of the world, pick your year, to less than 10% now by, certain measures. And so you could say that's how long it took, is 100 something years for, I mean, there's places in the world that don't have electricity still, right?
yeah,
Large swaths of the world that are just getting, you look at Mark Heinen, right? Like he built a company that was based around giving people access to electricity and creative modes of financing to make that possible. That's still where we are. I think industrial revolution is still making its way. I remember one of the I'll wrap it up, but like one of the touch points was like in 2019 or so. I was talking to like one of the heads of AWS, or I forget whether it was at Microsoft or AWS, but he was in charge of cloud, and he's like, still, and it was in 2019, 90% of Latin American businesses, the big ones, um, don't have any cloud footprint yet.
yeah. Maybe my pessimistic view, it comes from the fact that I live in Silicon Valley, and I'm having these conversations all day, every day.
Mhm.
And so we're very much at the leading edge, where we're seeing this new stuff happening so quickly, and it's very easy to get enamored by it. But there are constraints, and there's sand in the gears in terms of the diffusion. There's areas that are, let's call them, protected, right? If you don't have electricity, you're unlikely to have AI, right? If you are in a regulated environment, diffusion is going to take a lot longer in terms of AI. If you are a physical goods type of a business, diffusion is going to take a little bit longer. And also, in large part, the LLMs are constrained by they're totally constrained by the information they were trained on, and that the information has to be digitized. It has to be digital. So there's a bunch of places in the world where there's sort of tacit knowledge that is not yet digitized or not publicly available. Company secrets, the way you operate. So that limits, that's sort of the ingredients, the inputs, as well as chips and the sort of the energy necessary to do it. So, maybe I'm just being a little bit too pessimistic, but it
Yeah, look,
does.
my less pessimistic uh, outlook on those very same facts, which is not to say that like will it be good or be bad. It's again how you look at it. And I think if you were to take somebody from the 1800s, I remember I was reading about like the Napoleonic Wars, and they remembered people that were like 40 years before, and they were like, those were real men before things got really bad. And it's like, you're all just brutal thugs. This is terrible. You're just murdering each other. But it's like, yeah, but the way you murder, they used to do it right, and they would not recognize anything we're doing. They're like, they wouldn't. I mean, like we're doing a podcast. Like, what is that, right? Like, and to someone from 30 years ago, it's like, this is terrible. This is unproduced. You don't have a script. It's, you're barely editing it. And it's like, that's the future now, man. You just do stuff really fast. You have this, you make a podcast, you do it, a few people watch it, and then, maybe it gets popular, maybe it doesn't, maybe you do something else. It's a very different lifestyle that people don't recognize, but I find it very fulfilling. There's a lot of things that I want to do and a lot of things that I want to learn that I previously 5 years ago just said, well, that's it for me. I got to a lot of the things I want to do in my life, and I'm starting to see midlife. You turn 40. And then it's like, well, there's a bunch of stuff I'm just not going to get to. And now I'm just like, am I still going to have a job in 10 years? Because all things that I've ever wanted to do might become trivial and so easy that they won't even take you more than a few days. And I don't know, that's ups and downs. But I think what's happening is the world is going to get incredibly large. And here's what I mean by that. Beyond Elon putting data centers in space, this is a whole other thing. SpaceX acquired XAI this week. What the fuck? A rocket company owns the sexbot company. That's a
Sex
that's a
bot.
good
Okay. All
combo.
right.
But like the world is going to get very large, and not just because we will be able to go to the stars and things like that, but because the space of meaningful things that we can engage with is in fact not going to go to zero, as in the singularity where it's just human beings won't be able to interface with what's happening. I like this essay because it's actually an exploding number of things we're going to have to worry about. At the same time, an exploding number of capabilities. And also, the computers don't have to worry about human, and in fact can't in some way. There's going to be human things, and we're going to be living in a world where there was going to be a new frontier, and it won't be the frontier of the West. I mean, I think the United States is such a kick-ass country. Thank you for joining us, latecomer. And I think the U.S. was so great because we had this radically expanding frontier. I mean, they're literally just marching across because of horrible factors, empty continent, and we're able to come up with new systems and new ways of work, adopt new technologies very quickly. And Vannevar Bush, one of the great heroes of the military-industrial complex, wrote, I'm using that ironically, but really influential technology guy in the mid 20th century in the United States. Vannevar Bush wrote, not related to the other Bushes, by the way, something called the Infinite Frontier. Go look it up. Vannevar Bush Frontier, and it's basically like technology is going to provide us with that meaningful frontier that we can continually project our energy and our meaning into, while at the same time not stepping on each other's toes. And I think that's exactly the continuation of this frontier. And the fact that the frontier is expanding faster than we can meet it is not going to present a world where we have meaningless, but it's going to present a space of problems like this and things to deal with that will actually continue to engage us with an ever-present set of tools. Now, it's going to suck a lot, especially in the next few years, for people without a taste for novelty. But actually, I think
Mm.
be presented very likely with the ability to fuck off to your little, you want a 6-acre house out in the middle of nowhere. Well, guess what? There'll be a fucking drone helicopter that'll come drop stuff off. Don't interact with society. Great, yeah, go to it. But those of us who are addicted to novelty, like you said, problem solvers, I think it'll be fucking cool. I think that it'll be an expanding set of problems to deal with, and then as those problems are solved, even more problems will emerge, but they won't be quite as noble as the old problems. And I think that's what you're going to have to deal with, right? Like
that, the olden days were always better. But I'm more
just
excited by the newer problems in front of us.
if you're 1822 and you're just saying like, man, in the 1780s, they used to ride in and then just take a spear in the face. And now we stand, 150 feet away from each other and fire guns. It's just not like it used to be. And similarly, it's every generation you look back and it was far simpler, far more noble, far more boring in the past than it was in the future. And it's like, I don't know. I get to live once, and I'm not a big like I'm gonna live forever guy. I don't see the values. I feel like I'm an adolescent myself. That's just like slow. It's like you ever have this feeling and you're over 40 and you're just like, and now I'm really doing adult stuff, and it's like, bro, you've been here for quite a while, and eventually that novelty of life, might not just have the same spark. And when you have children, you see how excited and energetic they can get. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, this is a diminishing quantity. It doesn't need to go anywhere. But the fact that I'm in the next 40 years going to experience things that I never imagined 5 years ago is compelling for me. And I think will be the antidote to a lot of the problems.
So this is 2 thumbs up from Matt, which is very notable, Matt, because we've read a lot of these studies and essays over the last 12 months. This is the first one that you said was good. I'm going to, even though it puts me in a pessimistic mood, I'm also going to give it a thumbs up. It was, it's believable, it's thought-provoking, and it's kind of laid out, as you said, the things we need to do to point us in a more positive direction. So
I think our AI overlords. I got yelled at by somebody. He's like, Matt, that's clickbait. Because I was like, I welcome our AI overlords, the old Simpsons quote. But I don't know. These guys seem like they know what they're up to. Like I hate authority. I have like anti-authority at the core, and I'm just like, yeah, these guys. I like this Dario guy. He's pretty good. Anyway, Dario, if you want to acquire my company, I'm big
I'm
Anthropic.
with you. It reflects really well on them. Okay. All right. Let's wrap it up with our usual. We touched on a couple of things, exciting things that passed our desk. The one that I haven't spent enough time with it yet was, it happened so quickly as well. Moltbot, OpenClaw. There was one other name for it. Poor naming. Just to clear that up, Moltbook is a social network. Go
Yes.
look at it. It's kind of disappointing, actually, I think, but go look at it. The one I'm much more excited about is OpenClaw, which uses the underlying framework to build personal assistants.
I
And if
I
you,
I got my Mac Mini out.
oh, you
I'm
did?
on.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm on the. I had to go get a new keyboard for it.
It for Apple. Why? Because you run it locally. So if you haven't listened to our last episode about Claude Cowork, it's about personal assistants. The first, am I going to call it the first true personal assistant? No, but the first one with real potential. This OpenClaw is kind of the second iteration of that. And it is hugely fascinating to me. I
Yeah.
think we're
I
onto something interesting here.
the big shift that is coming, and I wrote down. I just had this conversation with a very interesting guy today. Very thoughtful. The big shift. You want one bit, right? When you kind of get to the core of something, it used to be like this, and then one thing changed, and it's going from you prompt AI to AI that prompts you, and that for me is the big shift. Claude, it was OpenClaw is always on, or Claude bot or Moltbot. These are always on bots that you can chat with, but can also send you WhatsApps. And actually, I got in trouble because I had my personal WhatsApp
It seems
connected.
like every week at some point in the episode, Matt, you say, I got in trouble, but keep going.
You should look. It's all about getting in trouble. By the way, I have a 2-year-old. She is a fucking troublemaker, and I'm like, this is the best. You need to get into trouble all the time. You need to get yourself into trouble and then get out of it. Hopefully, in the bargain, you end up slightly ahead. That the trouble you got into, you
Yep,
one
yep.
step back, 2 steps forward. But you can't get into no trouble. So I opened it up. It randomly sent one of my board members' wife WhatsApp, which was interesting. They loved it. They were like, "Oh, that's funny. That's great." So I got away with
Can you
it, but I
share
could
the
imagine
context? I mean, what
other
was the
points in
gist
my
of the
life,
message?
customers and things like that, where I would have been sent, shot into the sun for, "What, you
Yeah,
have a bot?" It's low security, but it does make that shift from a bot that you have to go and wake it up and tell do it this thing, into one that is just doing stuff at all times. And I think Moltbook is really waking them up. So these bots are just going and going and going and doing
yeah.
stuff. And maybe it's
And
used
by the
more,
way,
but
that
it's
was one of the
always on.
measures of powerful autonomy from those essays, that it's proactively interacting. And we've just hit that now, right? Which is super, super exciting. Anything else you saw this week you wanted to note?
I mean, the big one, the Anthropic did it, and I think OpenAI AI had their next update in the chamber to steal their thunder. OpenAI is mad at Anthropic because Anthropic's going to run an anti-ad Super Bowl ad. Apparently,
Watch those ads. They are unbelievably funny.
is good.
Yeah,
I love beef. I love big companies fighting. I think that's
yeah,
the core of democracy. Talk about pluralism and stability in democracy. Look, if all like we talked about this. Every single big company in the world is invested in both OpenAI and Anthropic somehow. It's just this big co-owned mess, right? And you worry about say Vanguard or BlackRock or one of these, they own 4% of every single company. There'll be this impulse like, well, let's not have our companies fight. Let's just produce extra profits, which actually in the long run kills things. I like it when big companies go to war. I like Coke versus Pepsi. I like, Microsoft versus Apple. I want OpenAI versus Anthropic to be bloody. I want it to be nasty. I don't like Google paying $20 billion a year to Apple. I want them to kill each other. I want there to be trouble, but hopefully it's not a nuclear war. But 4.6 came out for Opus.
yeah. You played with it?
I have not played with it for coding yet.
By the way, it
I
came
was,
out. I mean, it came out 4 hours ago, was it?
yeah, but I also wrote 3 pages of a novel using it, and it's pretty fucking good. I have this new thing, which is like my kind of like my James Joyce kind of like bar, which is like write a scene with tension in it. I want, because it requires
Oh,
the AI to understand the type of thing that I might become engaged with, and then also have a good planning loop with setups and payoffs. And so James Joyce is so good at that. Like, he has like the big gestalt payoff at the end of a novel. So sorry, getting back to my Irish. It's good. It's not
Is it?
Joyce. It's not Joyce, but it's a hell
Yeah.
of a lot better. You requires a lot of planning, and then I was playing with it. But to be clear, like that's the kind of test I'm running now to say like, would this produce human quality writing? Because so much of what I'm doing with my company is, can I interact with someone in a way that's not annoying? Right. So I need to have an AI that has that fine-grained understanding of tension so that I can engage users for business application purposes. But anyway,
Yeah.
maybe
I need
read
to
a
do
novel.
I have a similar test around humor, so I need to do my humor test on it now.
Go play with Opus 4.6. Try it with humor. Let me know. Long way to go on these things, but the pace is good. And business applications, we're clearly already clearing the bar in some of those. $600 billion of capex announced between the big companies. So I also believe since Claude Code, since Claude Bot, um, that I'm going to use in a lot more inference. And so I want remember when Uber and Lyft went to war, speaking of wars, and it was $2 to get anywhere you wanted in San Francisco? I need that because like I understand how many tokens and how much inference I want to use on my coding projects. And I'm starting to get worried that like they're going to just up the
Jack it up.
price. So I need a price war on inference, please, for the next few years, because otherwise I'm worried about my
Your
fiscal
margins,
safety. Yeah, so those were my big ones this week. I'm gonna watch the Super Bowl this
right?
weekend. Go watch the ads.
Yeah.
Excited.
Oh, those ads are so good. Um, just one more thing. Things are moving so quickly. If you're wondering what the heck we're up to between each episode, go find us on LinkedIn. We're reasonably good about posting stuff. So it's a good place to keep up
Yeah.
to speed with us. You did a super. Maybe we'll save for the next episode, or people can go find you on LinkedIn. You guys did a super interesting thing on a Friday 2 weeks ago, where you reached out and made an interesting offer. I reposted it as well.
Oh,
Maybe
thank
we
you.
can
Well,
talk
we
about
got
that
a
another
lot
time.
of interest on that. AI is advancing so quickly, but every once in a while there's these little clear encapsulations of a discrete step forward that companies can adopt without having to understand AI. And one of them is that you can do projects that used to be 6 months. And we've done a lot of these projects over the years. And so it's like, we went back out to our friends and clients at our old business. Remember when it used to cost $500,000 for 6 months? Like, what if we did a $5,000 2-week project? And it's real. It's real.
It
You
is
can just
real, and
build something super fast and
I
nobody knows. Why
yeah.
not? Let's play.
All
So
right.
anyway,
Well,
that was a lot of fun. Thank you for
all
reposting.
right. Let's maybe talk about that next week. We better wrap up. We've gone way long. Surprise.
Of course. The
All
the
right, Matt.
the
Well, listen.
episodes are gonna get long enough that actually news will break during
Yeah,
the
during them.
episode.
Actually, we
That's the
probably
next
need to watch
frontier.
that. Almost
What's that,
happened
the
today. All
BT?
right.
Yeah, alright.
Thanks, Matt. We'll talk
Good,
soon.
Ian.
Bye bye.
Bye.